He'd mentioned publicly that he liked the shows on T&E. We were thrilled that he came on board for Hotel Paranormal.
Well, we approached T&E. We knew that T&E had such a great success with the more sort of straight paranormal, ghost hunting, haunting genre.
And I am the founder of Spectrum Paranormal Investigations here in the UK. Also a television presenter on Paranormal Captured and The World's Most Unexplained as well.
And he's the one that told my mother the story of Bathsheba. So for Lorraine Warren to just pluck that out of nowhere was fascinating.
My name is Jeff Belanger, and I'm an author, a podcaster, a television host, and researcher of the unexplained. And it's my favorite subject in the world, and I've been fortunate to do it for 25 years now. So I've been the writer and researcher for every episode of Ghost Adventures since the first one back in 2008. And 14 years in a row is the longest I've ever held any one job, which is itself, if that's not proof of the paranormal, it's something close. I've been writing books about haunted places. I run the website ghostvillage.com since 1999. So I'd been writing about ghosts and haunted places for years. And then Zach Bagans approached me and said, hey, we're going to do this show. It's just going to be 8 episodes for the Travel Channel. We're looking for someone that knows the history and haunts, can help us find locations, help us, find people to interview and really set us up historically. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds cool. I mean, I'd done it for magazines and books and web and everything else, and I just hadn't worked in television yet. So I said, great, let's do it. And it was exciting to be part of a new show. And it was just supposed to be 8 episodes. So we did our thing. We filmed it. And then the Travel Channel said, hey, we have a hit. How fast can we get back to work? And that was our last day off in 2008. So we've pretty much been going ever since with specials and spin-off series and everything else. And it's been really cool to be part of such a juggernaut. That was 1999 when I launched it. It's still going. I mean, it's not anything like it was because I've been pulled in so many other directions. But it started because I'd interviewed Ed and Lorraine Warren back in 1997, who I grew up with them. And I had a few articles I'd written about the paranormal, and I wanted to learn how to build websites. So it was just 6 little web pages back in 1999. And I said, tell me about your ghost experiences. And people started emailing in, and I started publishing them. And then it turned into a community, and it turned into, everything else, kind of like the base of what I do. And then I started writing books and all that other stuff. But it was a really great way to start, at the right time and the right place. And it was the sort of foundation of everything I've done paranormally. You got to remember, I grew up in the 80s, and back then ghosts were still in the closet. You didn't talk about it. You did among your friends, but it's the kind of thing where you'd worry about losing your job if you were talking about haunted places and things like that, or you wouldn't talk about it at school, certainly. But where I grew up in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, and I was right next to Ed and Lorraine Warren. I knew them since I was 13 and would go see their programs, in libraries and things in October. And they'd share their evidence and they'd show some of their clips and stuff. And I'd be like, wow, this is amazing. These guys, search for this stuff and talk about it. And so I guess I grew up around it being a little more normal. And I had a friend down the street who lived in a house that was built in 1760. And, so, oh yeah, our house is haunted, but don't tell your parents. They'll think we're crazy. And so I just sort of grew up around it. And when I went to school, I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I got hooked on, the feature story, writing for newspapers and magazines. And in October, you go looking for ghost stories. So that's how it started for me. And then I moved those articles over to the web, and then it just grew from there. What's so funny about them is that they were just regional celebrities when I was growing up. They're way more famous today than they ever were back then. But back then there was no internet. It was there was a place on Main Street in Newtown where I lived, and it was called Superstar Sports, which they sold like tennis rackets and baseball gloves and all that kind of stuff. And it was an older building, but everyone said, "Oh, that building's haunted." Nah, come on, it's not haunted. And then someone would say, no, Ed and Lorraine Warren checked it out. And that was it. That was the last thing you said. And you'd say, oh, okay, well, then I'm not going to argue with that. Everyone knew that if you had a haunt, you called Ed and Lorraine Warren. when that movie came out. So I live about 30 minutes from the Conjuring house right now. Where I live in Massachusetts is just not far at all. And I know the whole Perron family. I know I've interviewed Roger. I know Andrea. You know, I've met the sisters. I've been to the house a number of times. I know the owner before. I, of course, knew Ed and Lorraine Warren. I knew Keith and Carl Johnson, the first two investigators to actually go in there before Ed and Lorraine Warren, way back when. And so to watch that movie and to know every single person being portrayed in the movie, you know what I mean? I'm like, I know everybody, the real people that all these characters are based on, was kind of a mind-blowing experience. And I love the movie. I thought it was a really fun horror film. However, doesn't reflect anything related to what actually happened there. I mean, it's a total work of fiction. But at the same time, if you can get your mind past that, I thought it was a really fun, horror film. And of course, it launched a very successful franchise of Ed and Lorraine Warren movies that are still going. I mean, when a movie company buys the rights to something, it's not yours anymore. It's like if I bought your car and then I painted it bright purple and knocked the windows out and like put flags all over it, you could be like, what have you done? And I could be like, it's mine now. I can do whatever I want with it. And you can get upset, but there's nothing you can do. You sold it to me. Right. So the Perron family, and you've talked to Andrea, so they lived there for years. If the house was trying to eat people, they would flee it. They would just run out, like they'd be like, this is dangerous. But they didn't. And Andrea wrote the book, House of Darkness, House of Light. And so she had said how scared they were, but then they came to live with and love their spirits. And that's just not going to make a compelling horror movie. Not really. That's the funny thing. I have a different backstory. I was raised Catholic, which I do feel is important to mention. So I had a lot of spiritual questions as I got older. And then I think I so badly wanted to see a ghost because I wanted to believe in something. I mostly lost my faith by the end of high school and into college. I never quite got to atheism, but I got close. And I figured at some point I realized, like, okay, a ghost is like the least common denominator of spirituality, right? I mean, this ghost, this ghost, there's a word for it in every language. There's an understanding of it in every culture. I mean, it appears in religious texts and so on. It's this thing that generally does not start fights. Right? If I were to tell you, like, hey, my religion should be your religion, we're going to fight. We're going to scuffle. Even if we're close, right? Even if we're not directly aligned, we're going to have words with each other. But ghost, if you want to take it as just a story, you can. If you want to take it as something more meaningful, then you can do that as well. And so I thought, if I could just see a ghost, then I would prove something to myself. And I started in this as a reporter, being objective. I want to hear both sides, talk to skeptics, talk to believers. I want to interview people that have had experiences, and they shared their ghostly encounters. And I didn't think people were lying to me. Most of them, anyway. I felt like they really experienced something genuine, but I hadn't had the experience for myself until I had been doing this for a few years. And it was a game changer. I was in Paris, France. And I was down in the catacombs and surrounded by millions of human skeletons. And I was alone walking down this long hallway, and I see this shadow the size of a man, step from one side and go to the other and come back again. And I just froze. And I said, all right, wait a minute. This must be what everybody's talking about. If not a ghost, I don't have another word for what that thing was. And that was 2003. So I'd already been writing about ghosts for like 6 years at this point. But then I saw that thing, and not only that, Trevor, when I saw that, everyone that I'd interviewed up to that point, probably hundreds of people at that point, now it's thousands, hundreds of people, all those experiences suddenly got more real to me in that moment. You know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, this is what you were talking about. This is that thing that you didn't ask for. You were just minding your own business in a place and time, and it happened. And I get it now. And so it took weeks and months for it to fully sink in. And like I said, it was a game changer. Yeah. It's an amazing place. I mean, it's and also my last name, Belanger, right? Or Belanger, if we were in Canada or France. there's some of my DNA is probably in some of those bones somewhere, and that wasn't lost on me, that my heritage, my family's been in the United States so long, it became Belanger. Your Canadian viewers and listeners are probably rolling their eyes right now going, oh, sacré bleu. They would say that, of course, not in Toronto. They would just say, dang, what's wrong with you, buddy? But yeah, when I go to France or Canada, I actually pronounce my name Belanger. So who knows? Maybe my DNA called out to some of the DNA in those bones, and this event happened at that place and time. I went back a few years later, and I was ready. I went right to the same hallway, and I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm back. Here I am. Go. Come on out. And nothing happened. The analogy I've used is that it's like a lightning strike. Lightning strikes the earth, many hundreds of times a day, just usually not nearby where you're standing. But once in a while, it does happen. Once in a while, someone gets struck by lightning. That does indeed happen. And boy, if you survive it, you will never forget it. Yeah. So I realized that as a reporter, right, you've got to answer who, what, when, where, why, and how, if you can, by the way. But to answer those questions, right? So you take a building, any building anywhere that has a haunted reputation. Someone says, oh yeah, that building's haunted. And my first question is why? Why is it haunted? It's haunted if multiple people over a period of time have had experiences they can't explain, right? I mean, that it's to me, haunted simply means reputation. But to answer why, you got to go back and it's the backstory, right? So what happened inside that building? What happened before that building was there? What's the timeline that we can establish that brings us right up to now, this moment where people are saying that it's haunted? And sometimes we find that there's historical events that back up the eyewitness accounts, and to me, that's magic, right? That's the golden, that's the golden egg right there. When someone says, I saw a ghost of a little girl in a red dress up on the second story window, and then you go back and you learn, a girl was hit by a train right nearby and brought to the nearest building, which was this one. And, and you go, whoa. And of course, the ultimate is to put a name on it, right? To be able to say like, wow, I found a name, and that's who we believe is haunting this building. That's the ultimate. And I, of course, we're only speculating at that point when buildings have been around a long, long time. Who's to say the ghost is the girl that got hit by the train and not like, some bartender who worked there for 2 or 3 years and had a heart attack, but everyone forgot about that person, but we can't help but connect. To me, a ghost, the simplest definition of a ghost is that it's the past coming to the present. And the unfinished business is usually our unfinished business, not theirs. We summon them. I truly believe that. I know it sounds like woo woo and witchcraft, but like when you walk into a building and oh man, someone was murdered here and the murderer was never punished. We summon the victim. We say, my gosh, can I find the answer? Like, I don't want this to happen again. I don't care that it was 100 years ago. People get away with murder. That doesn't sit right with us. It haunts us. And so, and that's why some of these places, I think, get these reputations, because we have to reconcile with it. Or, I mean, here's one better, right? I mean, I've done a lot of these events and stuff where we go to these great old haunts. And I remember we were at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado once, and I've been there a bunch, right? We've done different events there, but we lead these ghost investigations where different people come through, and someone will start to connect through whatever means. Maybe they're using dowsing rods or a pendulum. Maybe they're doing EVP, Ouija board, whatever they're using. And they'll be like, oh my God, I think I'm communicating with my grandmother. And you say, wow, did your grandmother ever stay here at the Stanley Hotel? Did she work here? Did she live here in Estes Park or something like that? She's like, oh, no, she's never even been to Colorado. And you go, well, what the hell is that? Right. And what I suspect is that these are connections that are around us all the time, but we don't think about them when we're in the grocery store, and just getting our 6-pack or whatever and picking up the wings and moving on. But when we're in a haunted location, suddenly, our senses, we're as open as we can be because we're looking for the ghost experience. And sometimes the closest ghost is grandma, who's been with you for years and years, but you sense her at, the Stanley Hotel, and at the grocery store, you're oblivious. So that's always curious to me too. And you get these, you get this evidence that may or may not be related to the actual location, which, by the way, is still amazing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care where it happens. I mean, if you think you're communicating with a spirit, it's incredibly profound. I mean, far be it from me to judge your experience. And that's one of the things I've learned over the years is to, I'd never judge someone else's experience. I mean, if you say you're communicating with grandma and Stanley Hotel, cool. I mean, I'm not in your head. I can't tell you you're wrong. I can tell you if I see it or don't see it, but that doesn't change anything. Like you said before, sometimes a personal experience is just for you. It's not for other people that are standing nearby. No. And I think that's what I love about this the most, right? Is that, we don't know for certain how this all works. If we did, I mean, shoot, would hang it up, right? But we get to ask like really big questions about life after death, and we get to look for our own answers. And when you're in a religious belief system, those answers are sort of spoon-fed to you, either through a holy book or through the interpretation of a minister of some kind, a priest, a rabbi, an imam, whatever, the religious leader is. Whereas people that go traipsing through cemeteries at midnight with audio recorders, right, are kind of like looking for their own answers, which I think is awesome. Like, by all means, do it. Ask your questions and find your answers. And we do, right? When I was really young and used to go to church, I remember feeling really gooey inside. It felt good. I felt like, oh, there's this community and this God that loves me and looking out for me and all that other stuff. I was also petrified. The idea that God was everywhere and was literally like in the car with us. I remember being a kid and telling my parents, like, can you ask God to get out of the car? I don't want him in here right now, and they had to ask him to leave. Poor thing. But so I remember those feelings, but then you get older, you get jaded. You're like, I don't know, is this real? Or am I just going through the motions? And then you get into a haunted place and you feel alive. You feel that electricity of just like, whoa, people have seen ghosts here and it's dark, and I might see a ghost, and that's exciting. I love it. Well, the Catacombs was the first. The Catacombs of Paris was the first one, but I was alone. I can tell you it was like 10, 11 in the morning. I was of sound mind and body, had not been drinking yet that day, but I was alone, and that's one of the things, right? I'm an advocate that if you're going to do investigations of any kind, alone is probably not a good idea for a number of reasons, right? Like, for one, like if you sprain an ankle, you don't want to be stuck somewhere, right? Whereas another person could just simply get help. But also, like if you were there with me, I could be like, Trevor, you see that thing down the line? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? And if you said, I see it too, well, that's twice as interesting as just me seeing it. So I was alone. But there was another time I was at Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, and been there a couple of times. The first time I was there, and I don't consider myself psychic or sensitive, but I walked in and it just the whole place felt electric from the moment we walked in. And I remember feeling like, the feeling of being watched, which is such a familiar trope, right? But it felt like, if you've ever been in the food court at the mall, how there's just like mobs of people around you. It felt like that, but there's this empty, abandoned hallways. And for those who don't know, Waverly Hills was an old tuberculosis sanatorium. So, over 400 rooms, people were brought there in some cases just to die, just to be comfortable while, they died of this horrible epidemic. And it was late, probably like 1 a.m. And there were 4 of us standing right at the bend in this hallway. There's like it's like a batwing design. And we were right in the bend, so we could look way down this hallway and we could turn the other way and look way down that hallway. And we were talking about nothing. Because, when you've been there for hours, like, you're talking about anything. And we all stopped talking at the same time. And I said, did you just see that? And they said, you mean the man that just stepped out, like, 3 doors down on the left? And I'm like, yeah, that. Like, this guy stepped into the hallway. And we had sort of secured it. We'd looked in every room when we had sort of established where we were. There was nobody there. And we all saw it, and we're like, okay, wait a minute. So we run to the door. Like, it was only like 20 feet or so. Run right to that opening and look inside, and there's nobody in there. And here's the thing. If that was a living person pulling a prank or sneaking around or whatever, the only two ways out of that room was either in the hallway, which we would have seen you, or to jump out the third story window, which absolutely we would have heard your screams when your bones broke, right? So then you look at each other and we go, oh man, we all saw this same thing. We all reacted the same way. And that's to me even more profound, because I don't buy into the idea of mass hallucinations. I just don't. It's never been my experience. But we all saw it. One of the things I've thought a lot about this, when people ask you to prove it, I wish I could. Believe me, if I could put a ghost in a jar, I'd be the first one to do it, and I'd charge you to see it. I'd be like P.T. Barnum, right? I'd be like, here's the ghost. It's $5 to see it, $10 to hold it. But I can't. I wish I could. But I can't prove to you that love exists either. But hopefully you've experienced that in your life. But you can't put love in a jar. I can't put humor in a jar. I can't put physical pain. If I were to take a needle and stick it in your arm, Trevor, you'd probably say, ouch, right? And anyone looking would say, I bet that hurts. But you might be one of those people that's practically impervious to pain and be like, whatever, right? We're all different. And so, and if the needle even gets near me, I'll scream like a tween, right? You don't even have to touch me with it. So I can't, how do I put pain in a jar and prove it to you? Or do you just take my word? You take my word for it with pain and humor and love, but not with ghosts. And that's unfortunate. I know people get so excited about all the technology and stuff that people use in this, and that's great. By all means, it's not my passion. My passion is not the gear and the gadgets. By all means, if other people want to sit all night with that stuff, have at it, but it's not for me, because I remember we were at Waverly, and like there was people that had like EMF meters and EVP recorders and all this stuff in their hands, and they're looking right down 6 inches in front of their nose, and they're looking at all this stuff and nothing's lighting up. And like there could be an army of ghosts like 20 feet ahead of you going, we're right here, right? But you wouldn't even see it. You'd just be looking down at your apps and your other stuff. And that's unfortunate, because to me, the personal experience is the most profound thing that we can walk away with from a haunt. And so I wouldn't want to miss, seeing or feeling or experiencing something in exchange for watching an EMF meter flicker. Sure. No, and don't get me wrong too. I think EMF meters, ghost hunters have saved many an old building from like when the EMF meter pegs in a wall and you're like, you got some really exposed wires back there that should probably be dealt with before this place burns down. Or I remember one case, someone was sleeping next to an old clock radio, and they said, boy, I have the worst paranormal experiences at night. And you go in with your EMF meter because you're doing sort of like a baseline sweep, and you get within like 2 feet of that clock radio, and it's like bing, like off the charts. And you go, so you sleep with your head like a foot away from this giant electromagnetic device. And so we said, hey, just for giggles, let's move the clock radio across the room and see how your ghosts are tonight. And it just turns out she was highly sensitive to electromagnetic energy. And so once that clock radio was away from her, she wasn't affected anymore. And so sometimes, there's a logical explanation for these things, and these tools can help us find it for sure. So bravo to the EMF meter on that one. But otherwise, we live on a big magnet called Earth. Those things get set off all the time. Oh man. So first of all, I would argue that any paranormal show you've ever seen, ever, your entire life, started with a legend, right? It started with a story. Someone said this place is haunted, and it's got the right look or the right backstory or the right elements that someone said, all right, I want to go investigate that. If paranormal investigators were truly being scientific, they would line up as many non-haunted places to investigate as haunted, right? You'd be like, hey, can we get into the Walmart after hours and look for ghosts, right? But that doesn't sound very interesting unless it's like Indian burial ground or something. You're just like, here I am by the, folding chairs and not getting anything. But that's okay. I get it. I totally get it. So to me, it always starts with a story, and the legend is an indisputably real, living, breathing thing that gets passed from one person to another, and we feed it, and it can marry, and it can move, and it can go to sleep and lie dormant, and it can die. But that only happens when we stop talking about it. So I love the idea of this collective consciousness thing with legends. That, why do we talk about this lake has a lake monster? That one not, because no one's ever mentioned it. This building is haunted, not that one, because no one's ever mentioned it. Or a monster's been seen in these woods, or even UFOs can become legendary. Places where people are often citing them. It becomes a hotspot because what happens is someone hears about it and then wants to go check it out for themselves and ultimately become part of the story. I mean, every time you've ever gone into a haunt, even if it's a moderately well-known haunt locally, you become a chapter in that book and that haunting forever. If nothing happens to you, you're still a chapter in that book. You can be like, yeah, everybody says it's so haunted. We went there one night, didn't get anything. I mean, that's still a chapter in the book. Or you might come away and go, holy cow, it lived up to the hype. We saw this, we experienced that. And then that's still another chapter in the book. It's really the story is where it starts, and I want to know the backstory. I want to know how the story got to be. My podcast, New England Ledgends, which I've been doing for 4 years now, every week we explore one of these weird stories, whether it's a haunting or a UFO landing site or a strange beast, but then also just weird history too. Like roadside oddities, anywhere that people have left a mark. Is a worthwhile story. You know what I mean? And I love that. Even if it's like some kind of roadside oddity where someone put that up. You know what I mean? And you might take it for granted because you pass it every single day on the way to work, but like someone built it, and some people go out of their ways to see these things. And I adore all of that. I call it the croutons in the salad of where we live. Yeah, so the furthest I went was Manning Quarantine Station in Sydney, Australia. And the reason that's the furthest is because if I went any further, I'd be getting close to home again. That's pretty much the opposite side of the earth from me here in the Boston area. So, but I would go anywhere. Have passport, will travel. Absolutely. I think every culture, every country has its the unique way that it deals with these subjects. And Manning Quarantine Station, man, that was rough. The Aussies took nothing when people were that's where that was like their Ellis Island, for Americans, right? So that was the first stop when you were trying to move to Australia, and they were brutal. Did you just sneeze? If you get over there, if you sneezed, you get over. You get children pulled away from their parents, parents pulled away from their kids. If anyone's sick, sometimes they just left you in rooms to die because they didn't want you bringing diseases into their country. Brutal but effective. And so sometimes kids were orphaned when someone was just ill with something. And so you go into these old buildings and there was these bunk houses and everything, and you're just like, oh man, I mean, you feel it, you feel it in those places. And I always try to imagine what it must have been like being a person that was brought here. Imagine that you're not just like right off the boat, but instead they go, oh, you know what, Jeff, you look a little pale. Go over here, and you go, uh-oh, right? Am I sick? And if I wasn't sick before, maybe I just had a cold, but now you're putting me in this bunkhouse with people who are really sick. And now I might really get like smallpox or something that I can't do anything about. Oh, horrible. The fear. I mean, you can only imagine what that must be like. But we investigated, and I was in Australia actually for an event, and then we ended up going to this old jail that was really cool, just north of Sydney, which was awesome. But but when I'm like, I can't miss Manning Quarantine Station. I mean, to me, that's such an international iconic haunt. So we got to go there, just a few of us, one night and check the place out. And then also too, like, Australia's got insects and snakes and stuff that could kill you just by looking at you. And so you see like these little brown spiders, and you're like, oh, is that one of those things where like if it bites me, I don't have time to get to the hospital for the antidote? Yeah, right. I'm like, I don't want to become another ghost here, So anyway, but it was amazing. Great experience. Sometimes. So I've been a part of a few of the episodes. Most of the miniseries I've scouted ahead of time. So I've gone out there and found the locations, talked to the people and stuff like that. But for the most part, I can do what I do remotely. Just connecting. We have various tools we use that we subscribe to, like newspaper archives that I can't recommend enough if you do paranormal research. Centuries of newspapers from all over the world. You can search for properties, title searches. You go looking for names associated with a property. See if anything happened there, and local historical societies, local libraries. Local libraries are this untapped resource that so many people don't know about. Whenever I'm stuck, here's a pro tip. I call the local library and I just say, this is my name. This is what I'm working on. Do you have any direction you can point me in? And almost always they go, oh, let me think about that. You know what? You need to talk to Joe, who's down at this cafe. He owns the place, but man, he's been here forever. And he used to tell me, here, I'm going to get you his number. And you tell him I said to call it. You know what I mean? Like, librarians are so connected to their communities. So it's incredible how you can sort of network when you're researching stuff. So here's what happens when you go into a town or a community, and you're interested in their ghosts or whatever. If you just knock on Main Street's door, right, and say, hey, I'm looking for, information on this haunting, someone's going to look at you and size you up and in like 1 second decide if you're worthy or not. And quite often, you will not be found worthy, by the way. I know this from experience. I don't mean you, I mean all of us, right? So, but then when you find the right people and you network and you just say, look, I collect ghost stories. I'm looking for haunted places. This is what I'm working on. And I really sincerely want to know more. That person trusts, right? Because what happens when someone tells you about something weird like this, they're saying, I trust you. I'm trusting you with this precious thing, this like our local haunt or an experience I had personally. And I'm going to gift it to you when I tell you about it. And if you treat that with honor and respect, that person's going to invite you to Sunday dinner, and then they're going to introduce you to other people. And suddenly you can get below the surface of a community so fast. I mean, I've done it in a matter of hours. Where I was in Juneau, Alaska once, which is the capital of Alaska. And there's no way in there except by air or boat, right? You can't take a train. You can't drive in. And I went to the Alaskan hotel because I heard it was haunted. And I said, look, this is what I do. I'm interested in the haunting here. And they just sort of looked at me for a long second I came in on a cruise ship. There's like tourists everywhere. And suddenly they were like, oh, come on, let's go talk to this guy at the bar. And he's like, hey, tell this guy what you saw coming down the stairs. And he's like, oh yeah, I saw this woman in a dress just float down the stairs and then she vanished. And then other people start sharing their stories and you're like, this is amazing. And you cease being a cheesy tourist. And now you're interested in something that's unique and local to them and personal. And people just opened up. That was for a book. My book, The World's Most Haunted Places. I was my first book. That was I was out there. It was a chapter in that book. Cool. 15 now. I've written 15 books, and some of those are multiple editions and things. For people who are listening and can't see, the shelf behind my head is full of books, even in languages I don't speak. There's like it's pretty cool. Like when you hold your book and it's written in Russian. I don't know how it translated, but hopefully well. So yeah, 15 now, and to me, a book is like an exorcism. At this point, you do it because it doesn't pay very well. I can't recommend enough another line of work, but you do it because you've got this story and there's just no other way to get it out. So yeah, but no, it's sometimes you always let the story dictate, right? So some stories need to be a book. Some just a 3-minute YouTube video is fine. Others are a documentary film, and some are an episode of Ghost Adventures. And I just always try to, and some can be more than one of those, right? But I just sort of always try to let the story dictate what medium it should be. So we live in an amazing time, right? So, yeah. I get television is and video really. YouTube is all the same, right? is such a visual medium where you get to show the building. We're going to go inside and film it, and you can walk there with us. And what a cool experience that is. But I'm not going to be able to give you a lot of detailed information on television, right? There's not enough words, right? If you look at a single sheet of paper that you would put in your printer, right, and print words on it, right? A 350 word single spaced article would take up like maybe 2/3 of one side of that piece of paper. And if you were to read that text in television, you're looking at like 4 or 5 minutes. That's it, right? That's not a lot of space. That's not a lot of information. When you watch the televised news, and I can't recommend enough that you not watch televised news. I don't care where you stand politically. You are getting the least possible amount of information in televised news, cable television, broadcast, all of it. It's the least possible amount of information you can get. When you watch a 3-minute news piece, you're getting like 150 to 200 words of content, which is not much. There's not a lot that you can say in that little bit of time. And I'm not disparaging it. I work in television. I think it's great. And there are certain stories that are made for TV, and it's perfect. But I mean, if you really want to get into the meat of the details, you're going to need a book. Is my only point. Yeah, right. Well, so, that's what's cool too. So people that have a yearning to broadcast, right? What a cool time we live in. It used to be you either had to be affiliated with a radio station or a television network or channel of some kind. And now, I mean, if you've got something to say, the tools are there for you to say it. And how great is that? And if you've got, and an audience might find you, I mean, whether it's YouTube or, your own podcast or wherever you chose to put this stuff up. I think that's awesome. It means we can all have a voice. And if you do what you do well, the cream will rise to the top. Yeah. So, I mean, still working on Ghost Adventures, still doing my weekly New England Ledgends podcast, which you can get wherever you get podcasts. It's free. And then, the fall is coming up, and I do an in-person tour every fall. And so that's really booked up. I'm still booking more dates, but I think I've already got like 50 dates booked for just between September and December. And I love that. I love that more than anything, to be in front of live audiences. I'll be at conferences and things. Sharing the stories in person is my favorite thing to do. And because I don't get to sit in your lap when you watch Ghost Adventures or when you read my books or whatever. So that's coming up, and all of it's on my website, which is my name, jeffbelanger.com.
Well, thank you, Jeff, so much. It was so nice to meet you and get to talk to you. And I hope we can do it again sometime. So
sounds good. All right. Thanks, Trevor. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.